We were deep in the bush that night, crickets chirping all around us as we moved quietly, lanterns in one hand and pointed cutlasses in the other. The early rains had softened the ground, making it easier for us to dig up the crickets from their holes. It was a good night for hunting, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and the rustle of leaves as the wind whispered through the trees. My name is Soa. This is one of my stories. Please subscribe to Adventures of Soa to enjoy captivating stories about me and the beauty of Africa. Danso was ahead of us, as usual, his keen eyes and sharp ears guiding him toward the faintest cricket song. Kofi and I followed closely, our hearts pounding with excitement. The thrill of the hunt always got to us, the anticipation of catching the screeching insects that would soon fill our bags. But that night, we were about to stumble upon something far more thrilling and dangerous. We were moving through a thick patch of bush, our feet crunching softly on the dry leaves underfoot when Danso suddenly stopped. He crouched low, peering intently at something on the ground. Kofi and I exchanged curious glances and hurried over to see what he had found. At first, I thought it was just another animal, maybe a small antelope or a bush rat caught in a snare. But as I got closer, I saw it was something else entirely. It was a leopard cub, small and trembling, its eyes wide with fear as it lay curled up on the ground. The sight of it made my breath catch in my throat. A leopard cub! Danso whispered, his voice tinged with awe. He reached out slowly, his hand hovering just above the cub's head. We shouldn't touch it, I said, glancing around nervously. Where there's a cub, the mother can't be far. But Danso wasn't listening. He gently picked up the cub, cradling it in his arms. The cub mewed softly, a sound so pitiful that it tugged at our hearts. Even Kofi, who was usually the most cautious of us, couldn't resist the allure of the tiny creature. It's lost, Danso said, his voice filled with wonder. We can take it home and raise it. Kofi grinned, his eyes lighting up with the prospect of having such a rare and powerful animal as a pet. Imagine what the other boys would say when they see us with a leopard. I felt a thrill of excitement at the thought, but also a twinge of fear. What if it's dangerous? What if its mother comes looking for it? Danso shook his head. It's just a cub. We'll take good care of it. Besides, its mother is probably far away, hunting or something. Reluctantly, I agreed, and we decided to quit our cricket hunting and head back to the village. As we walked, we talked about how we would take turns caring for the cub, feeding it and keeping it hidden from the adults. I won't let my sister touch it, I declared, feeling a surge of possessiveness. She'll just want to play with it like it's some kind of doll. Kofi chuckled. And we'll have to make sure it doesn't get out of the house, or the whole village will know about it. As we talked, the cub began to mew louder, squirming in Danso's arms. I frowned, glancing around uneasily. The forest seemed different now, the shadows deeper, the sounds more menacing. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves overhead, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Then, out of the darkness, a low growl rumbled through the air. We froze. Slowly, I turned my head, my eyes scanning the thick undergrowth. My heart hammered in my chest as I spotted a pair of glowing eyes staring back at us. They were yellow, fierce, and full of anger. My blood ran cold as the creature stepped into the light of our lanterns. It was a fully grown leopard, its body sleek and muscular, its fur a beautiful pattern of rosettes that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. It was huge, much bigger than I had imagined, and it was staring directly at us, its gaze fixed on the cub in Danso's arms. Drop it, I whispered urgently. Danso, drop the cub! But Danso was frozen in place, his eyes wide with terror. The leopard took a step closer, its growl deepening, and in that moment, I knew we were in serious danger. Drop it now! I shouted. The leopard's muscles tensed, ready to spring. Danso's eyes flicked from the leopard to us, and in a split second, he threw the cub away from him. The cub tumbled to the ground with a yelp, and the big leopard lunged at us. We didn't wait to see what happened next. The three of us scattered, each of us bolting for the nearest tree. I could hear the leopard snarling behind us, the sound of its paws thudding against the ground as it gave chase. My heart pounded in my ears as I scrambled up the trunk of a tall baobab tree, my hand slipping on the rough bark. I climbed as high as I could, my breath coming in ragged gasps. When I finally dared to look down, I saw Kofi perched on a branch of another tree nearby, his face pale with fear. Danso was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Danso?" I called out, my voice trembling. Kofi shook his head, too scared to speak. I scanned the ground below, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The forest was eerily silent now, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. I couldn't see the leopard, but I knew it was still out there, hunting us. My mouth was dry with fear, and I clutched the tree branch so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Then, I heard a rustling sound directly below me. My heart leapt into my throat as I saw the leopard emerge from the bushes. It was looking up at me, its eyes narrowed with predatory intent. My blood turned to ice as it began to climb the tree, its powerful claws digging into the bark. Before we continue further, please click the subscribe button below for more adventures of Soa. Have you done that? Okay, let's continue. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or cry out. The leopard was getting closer, its eyes locked on mine, its jaws parted to reveal sharp, glistening teeth. I could feel the branch trembling under my weight, and I knew that if it broke, I would be done for. The leopard was almost upon me now, its body coiled like a spring, ready to leap. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for the inevitable. Suddenly, a loud shout echoed through the forest, startling the leopard. I opened my eyes to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a man with a gun slung over his shoulder. It was Kwame, the village hunter, his face set in a fierce scowl. "Get away from that boy!" Kwame shouted, raising his gun. The leopard hissed, its eyes blazing with anger, but it hesitated, torn between attacking me and fleeing from the hunter. Kwame took a step closer, brandishing his gun, and the leopard finally backed down, snarling as it leapt from the tree and disappeared into the undergrowth. But before it disappeared, Kwame made sure he chased it further into the undergrowth. Kwame stood there, breathing heavily, his eyes scanning the trees until he spotted me. "Soa, are you all right?" I nodded, too shaken to speak. Kofi and Danso, who had been hiding in a tree not far away, slowly climbed down, their faces pale and their bodies trembling. Kwame walked over to us, his expression stern. "What were you boys thinking? A leopard is no pet to be taken home." "We didn't know," Danso said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't mean any harm." Kwame sighed, shaking his head. "You're lucky to be alive. That leopard could have killed you all." We nodded, our hearts heavy with the realization of how close we had come to disaster. The thrill of our earlier discovery had turned to ash in our mouths, and the weight of our foolishness pressed down on us like a stone. Kwame led us back to the village in silence, the dark forest closing in around us. The crickets had fallen silent, and the only sound was the crunch of our footsteps on the dry leaves. As we walked, I couldn't shake the image of the leopard's fierce eyes from my mind. It was a night I would never forget, a lesson learned in the heart of the bush. From that day on, whenever we went hunting, we made sure to stay far away from the places where leopards might roam. The forest was full of dangers, and we had been lucky to escape with our lives. But the memory of that night stayed with us, a constant reminder of the wildness that lurked just beyond the edge of our village. I hope you enjoyed my story. Please subscribe.